that's more pleasant to play than it is to hear, because it sits under the fingers so lusciously. So, it's Father's Day, which is great. I love Father's Day. What I want to tell you about is my dad for a moment, because like a lot of dads, he was a go to the office kind of guy. Every morning, he would get up, get dressed, shave, put on his suit, put on his tie, put on his hat. Remember when men used to do that every day? Go out the door with his briefcase. If it was cold, there'd be a top coat, of course. And he'd take the bus to work, because it was so long ago that two-car families were rare. And he would go downtown to his office job. He was a man of consequence at the B&O Railroad, so he had to look the part. He was very dignified. When we went to church, he always wore a suit and a tie. Dan Tinkham, you're still doing that. God bless you. On a June day, man, whew. At any rate, he was a dignified fellow. And he looked like Nelson Rockefeller, only more grim. Now, the part is that everybody saw that part of him because he was a numbers guy and a financial person, and he was very serious. And even though we were political and religious liberals, we knew we were surrounded, so you didn't tip your hand too much. You know what I mean, don't you? But the point is that there were parts of him, of course, other people didn't see, like the time I came home with my mom from being out, and it was when we were very young, and there was my brother who was 2 years younger than me, and my sister. There were only 3 of us out of 4 so far, so she was 1 and he was 3 and I was 5. And there was my father on the couch, and his hair was standing on end because he had blown up balloons and rubbed them all over each other's hair. So all the kids had hair standing out, and he did too, and he was sticking out his tongue and going blah, 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 blah. And everyone was having a great time, and you would never see him do that anywhere but there. And of course we think, well, of course not, that's not dignified. But last week there was a little babe who was visiting us in early worship. His name is Vincent. And, well, he was the kind of guy, if you remember I talked about him, he wanted to make a break for it. So we all had a pact that if he ran off, we would all grab him and snag him back. And I'd put him in my arms and carry him back to his mom, which we can't do in this room, because this room does not speak of babies the way other rooms do. We have a dignified space. And worship for us has been in that mold of dignity and decorum and majesty and serenity, which is a beautiful, beautiful, powerful way to worship. I told the story in early worship this morning that when the Prince of Kiev decided it was time to become a Christian, it was politically to his advantage, he sent his ambassadors to Rome and to Constantinople to figure out which kind of Christian he ought to be. And in Rome in the year 989, it did not have Michelangelo's church at all. It was a much more messy place. It was dangerous. People got mugged in the church, and it was rather smoky and difficult to make your way, and it looked rather bedraggled. And then they went off to Constantinople, which was the center of the Byzantine Empire, so there was still an emperor with lots of money, and there was the Hagia Sophia, which was built in the 8th century, so it was still relatively new. And if you have not been there, it is a gobsmacking place to go. I heard years ago, and this was my father talking, that Mr. Marriott of the Marriott Hotels wanted to make sure every hotel he made had an entryway that got into a large atrium. Have you ever been through those? You know you have. And you're going through the little passage. You come out of the atrium and you go look up and say, "Holy!" You can insert whatever word you want right there. Well, that's how the emissaries from the Prince of Kiev felt. They were overwhelmed. It is an enormous space. It was, until St. Peter's that we have now in the 16th century, the largest Christian edifice on the planet. And it's still gigantic. Even in a state of decay, you look around and say, this is an impossibly majestic space. And so the emissaries to the Prince of Kiev went back and said, we got to be Orthodox. They're closer to God, because when we went into that building, it felt like we were in heaven. So I understand the desire for majesty, for dignity and decorum. I understand it a great deal, but it's a little bit like my father. It's not the whole story. There are times when being religious calls for more than dignity and more than majesty. It calls for irony or play. It calls for this because when we play the piano down here, and I guarantee I'm as nervous as a cat. I'm so nervous I only got 2 hours sleep last night. But we use the word play, and shouldn't that mean something fun? And of course, when we use the word play the piano, it's not the same as playing pretend, which is what kids do, and yet that's how they learn, by pretending. We use the word play to mean so many things. We go to see a play, and it's often a very serious play, and yet we know they're pretending, right? These are not happening to us right now. If you see a film, it's the same thing. No matter how much it looks alike, they're pretending, and play is pretense. It really is. It's not real. Playing is not the real thing. Kids play, adults work, and yet, as you heard from Jan Heitzingr this morning, that the art of poetry is where religion comes from, of enchantment, of dreams, of things larger than the serious. I came up with a saying long ago, and I want you to keep this, because though this is our last service in the sanctuary for a while, we're going to go into the chapel. I want you to be able to bring some of the chapel back with you next time. I want you to hear this, because this is a really important saying, and I made it up so you can quote me. Life is way too important to be taken seriously. Because if we treat things seriously, we tend to press them down. They're grave, aren't they? We think gravity, and it settles down. And life is serious. There's a lot of seriousness out there. There's hunger, there's war, there's famine, there's corruption, there's disease, there's affliction, there's struggle and oppression. But if we let that weigh us down, it will take all the life out of life, won't it? So the irony is the most subversive thing we can do for life, the most revolutionary thing we can do with our faith, the most dramatically exciting, liberating, liberal thing we can do is to cultivate our capacity to play with our faith, with our beliefs. Because after all, if they're real beliefs and they really matter and we really care about them, they will be true whether or not we treat them seriously, right? One of the things I enjoyed about the Godspell pieces we did this year in Lent is these were sometimes funny, playful songs, and yet they had important things to say. And the important parts didn't get lost in the playful bit, did they? We still heard the important parts through the playful and even irreverent qualities. This is a liberal church. One of the things we do here is to be irreverent. I need you to cultivate your irreverence toward liberal religion as well as toward conservative religion, to be irreverent about our culture as well as someone else's, to be willing to play in the sense of pretend, make up, pull, twist, move it in different directions, to allow the inner child of yours that wants to color the opportunity to color outside the lines of liberal church. You all want to do it, I know you do. And you might be thinking, well, we don't want to give up our dignity. And I'm here to tell you that dignity is innate. You already have it. Each and every one of you has it. And when I mean dignity, I mean value. I mean something that belongs to you that is so precious it cannot be named. You all have it. And when people try to take it away, whether it's government or religion or society, we should protest. We should say, hey, wait, quit that. The same way we should stop any adult from keeping a child from trying to color. Because we need to be able to have that dignity. But the reality is you can't really take it away. It's already there. I want you to carry yourself with the playfulness of those who know they are dignified. To remember that the burden of liberal religion is easy, that the yoke is easy and the burden is light, that we are here to be present and alive in our lives, and that if we can subvert the gravity of politics, if we can subvert the seriousness of the economy, if we can subvert the immense dignity of all the pomposities that tell us they are important and we are not, that it's time in some way to stick out our tongue at the world, to color outside the lines, to allow the Spirit in here to run amok from time to time. Yes, it will be mostly contained, and it should be, but now and then we should be able to play hopscotch or ring around the rosy or tag or a number of other things that remind us that we are here to take joy, to find dignity, meaning, worth, and joy in our days. So, my wish for you, life is too important to be taken seriously. And if you intend to be alive, you have to play, or it's just not worth it. The last hymn that we're going to sing today is one we only do once a year because it's a blessing. It's the first hymn in the book, so it serves as a blessing on the whole enterprise. It's a poem by Louis Untermeyer called "May Nothing Evil Cross This Door." I am enormously proud of this poem because I was on the book commission that wrote this, and we had it in another book, and I said, this has to be the first hymn because it is a blessing. And then, when I was in a store one day, a rare bookstore, I found a signed copy of it, signed by Louis Untermeyer, one of my most pleasing possessions. So, let us bless this house with our song as we conclude a season of worship in this sanctuary.